He was just trying to live a quiet life. A nurse, a brother, a man who showed up early, stayed late, and helped people the system forgot. But one morning, a cruiser started following him, and that was only the beginning. The man behind the badge wasn't just watching, he was waiting. No reason, no record, just pure hate hiding behind authority. But John didn't shout, he documented, he gathered proof. And when the city refused to act, he built a case so strong, even the silence couldn't hold. As pressure builds, the truth breaks through. One man's fight becomes a movement. And justice doesn't come easy, but it comes loud. Would you have stood your ground like John did? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you, because voices like his deserve to be heard. City hadn't fully woken up yet, but John was already out the door, thermos in hand, keys tucked between two fingers like always. The street still held that early haze, the kind that clung low before the sun rose high enough to cut through. He liked it like this. Quiet, predictable. He lived in a second-floor walk-up just east of downtown where the buildings hadn't been gutted by developers yet. Nothing fancy. Just a one-bedroom with a decent kitchen and a balcony that overlooked the dog park. Rent was manageable, which meant he could keep sending money to his younger sister in Texas while still putting some aside. His parents were gone, had been for years, and she was all the family he had left. Well, her and Coco, the mutt that greeted him with a half-howl every night when he came home late from his shift at the clinic. John was a nurse, 10 years in. He worked nights 3 days a week and day shifts on weekends at a community health center. It wasn't the biggest place, but it was steady work, and they served a population that didn't have a lot of options. Immigrants, the uninsured, LGBTQ plus folks who didn't feel safe elsewhere. He didn't wear it like a badge, but he was proud of what he did. Kept his head down, showed up early. Stayed late when someone's coverage fell through and they needed help anyway. The route he took to work was always the same. Get on 8th, cross over the underpass, hang a left by the diner with the flickering neon, and then cruise through the West End until he hit the clinic parking lot. It wasn't a glamorous part of town, but it was his routine. The security guard at the front gate knew him by name. So did the barista at the little coffee stand inside. That kind of familiarity made a place feel like home, even if you were just passing through it on borrowed time. John had always been the kind of guy people called reliable. Even back in high school, before he figured out how to name what he felt, he was the one people trusted to drive, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who carried extra pens in his backpack. He came out quietly in college after watching too many friends spiral from carrying secrets too long. By the time he started working at the clinic, his coworkers already knew. Nobody cared, or at least if they did, they kept it to themselves. It wasn't a big deal. That morning, like every Sunday, he wore the same hoodie, navy with the clinic's logo on the chest, and the same comfortable jeans with the keys looped onto his belt. He never liked dressing up unless he had to. The people who came into the clinic were tired of suits and forms and people who didn't look like them. John made it a point to look like someone they could talk to. As he backed out of the driveway, the neighbor's dog barked once, a low warning that faded into the hum of the morning traffic. A light breeze carried the scent of rain, nothing immediate, just a hint. John adjusted the AC knobs in the car, plugged in his phone, and let the navigation speak to him even though he didn't need it. Routine again. Reassurance in repetition. He stopped by a gas station on 9th to grab a pack of gum and fill up the tank. Inside, the cashier nodded at him. Same kid as always, headphones half in, barely looking up. John paid in cash, took his change, and headed back out. It was when he pulled out onto the road again that he saw the cruiser. Parked a little crooked across 2 spaces, engine idling. A lone officer inside. John didn't think much of it. Cops sat out there sometimes to write reports or take a break from patrolling. The West End wasn't exactly a crime hotspot, but it wasn't squeaky clean either. Still, the car moved when he did, pulled out behind him. John checked his speed. He was doing 34 in a 35, no rolling stop, no busted lights, everything was in order. The cruiser didn't flash its lights, just followed, for blocks. He kept calm, didn't speed up, didn't turn off the main road to lose him. That wasn't how you handled things, not around here. You didn't give anyone a reason to say you were acting suspicious. He took the next left like he normally would, into the strip of industrial buildings just before the clinic. The cruiser followed. He reached the back lot of the health center, rolled into the same spot he always took, and cut the engine. The cruiser pulled in after him, parked 2 spaces down, still didn't flash its lights, still didn't get out. John sat for a second, hands resting on the steering wheel, then slowly unbuckled and stepped out. He kept his movement smooth. Not slow, just careful. The officer inside the cruiser rolled down his window. "You work here?" the man asked. John nodded. "Every weekend." The officer looked him up and down. "Got ID?" John reached for his lanyard, pulling it out from under his hoodie. The badge was laminated and clipped, clear as day. John Ortiz, RN. The officer didn't take it, just looked at it. "Were you headed this early?" John blinked. "Work, I'm on shift in 10. The officer didn't move, didn't introduce himself, just stared for a second too long, then said, "You look nervous." "I'm always like this before coffee," John replied, keeping his tone even. The officer gave a tight smile, no humor in it, and pulled away without another word. John watched the cruiser disappear around the corner. He didn't move right away. Just stood there, ID still in hand, feeling something itch between his shoulder blades. It wasn't the first time a cop had eyed him sideways, but it was the first time one had followed him from a gas station to a clinic parking lot without reason. Inside, the front desk was already buzzing. Angie waved to him from the triage station, and someone in the back yelled that the espresso machine was finally working. Normalcy rushed back in, but John kept his voice quiet, his smile forced. He didn't mention the cruiser, not yet. He made his way to the locker room, changed into scrubs, and stared at his reflection for a few seconds longer than usual. He'd done everything right, clean car, no speeding, ID on display, and still he was being watched. That night after the shift ended and he walked Coco under the orange glow of the streetlights, he thought about the officer's eyes, not curious, not suspicious. Something colder, he didn't know it yet, but that morning wouldn't be the last time he'd see that cruiser, or that cop. And the next time things wouldn't end with a silent drive away. The next time John saw the cruiser, it was 2 days later. He had the early shift again, this time filling in for Anna, who was out on family leave. He didn't mind. Overtime was good, and the clinic was always short on nurses anyway. It was still dark when he left the house, but the streets were already alive in that strange pre-dawn way. Delivery trucks grumbled down alleys. Street cleaners hissed against the pavement. The world was already working, even if it hadn't fully woken up yet. He was halfway through the underpass when he spotted the car in the rearview. Same make, same color, same crooked parking stance. This time it didn't follow him, just sat there. Lights off, engine idling. John kept driving, eyes flicking up to the mirror more than usual. He wasn't the type to jump at shadows, but something was off. You could feel it in your teeth sometimes, the same way you knew a storm was coming before the first raindrop hit the ground. At the clinic, the morning was quiet. Just a few walk-ins and a regular who needed her insulin adjusted. John was in the middle of logging her vitals when Angie poked her head in and said, "There's someone out front asking for you." He frowned, a patient. Said he's not sick, just wanted to talk to you, didn't give a name. John wiped his hands and walked to the front, expecting maybe someone from his neighborhood, or maybe a patient who'd gotten his name from the free testing outreach they'd done last month. But standing near the reception desk, arms crossed and eyes locked on John, was the officer. He wasn't in uniform this time. Jeans, button-up black jacket over one arm, but John recognized him right away. Same buzzed haircut, same pale stare like he was scanning John's face for something to file away. "Morning," the cop said, tone dry. "Got a minute?" John hesitated. "Can I ask what this is about?" The man shrugged, "Just a conversation. We usually don't take personal visitors during clinic hours." "I won't take long." Angie gave John a glance, eyebrows raised. He gave a tiny nod, then turned to the cop and said, "We can step outside." They stood near the side lot, just out of earshot of the entrance. John kept his back to the building. It felt safer that way, like someone might still see if things got weird. "I didn't catch your name the other day," the officer said. "I don't think I gave it." The man smiled like John had told a joke. "You always that defensive." "I don't usually get followed to work." "Followed? That's not how I remember it." "You pulled into the same lot I did, sat there, didn't say much, felt like more than coincidence." "You sure you're not just sensitive?" the cop asked. "You people tend to be." John's breath caught. "Just a second, just long enough." "You people," he repeated, "you know what I mean." "No," John said, "I don't." The officer looked him up and down, slow and deliberate. "You're not from around here, are you?" "I was born 5 blocks from here." The man smirked. "Doesn't show." "Is there a reason you're here?" John asked, voice flatter now. "I keep an eye on this neighborhood. Lot of things pass through. Drugs, prostitution, sometimes worse. Just making sure the clinic's not mixed up in anything it shouldn't be." John blinked. "You think we're a front for a drug ring?" "Not saying that, just asking questions. We have 3 social workers, 2 physicians, and a dentist. If you've got suspicions, come back with a warrant." That wiped the smirk off the cop's face. "Just trying to keep the streets clean," he said. John didn't respond. "You got nothing to hide, you got nothing to worry about," the officer added. John met his eyes. "I've heard that line before." The officer took a step forward. Not much, but enough that John felt his ribs tighten. "You one of those activist types, always recording everything, always crying wolf." "I do my job, I help people who don't have anywhere else to go. That bother you?" The cop held the stare a second longer, then turned and walked off. John stood there for a beat, then walked back inside. He didn't say anything to Angie or the others, not yet. It was just weird enough to sit on, just subtle enough to feel like maybe he was overreacting. But the you people stuck with him, and the look. That slow, scanning look like he was trying to figure out how John fit into a puzzle he was building in his head. That night, he wrote everything down. The time, the place, what the officer said. Not just because he was nervous, but because he'd learned a long time ago that when people like that came after you, they didn't come all at once. They chipped away at you, a stare, a question, a comment, and if you didn't have it written somewhere, they made you feel like you imagined the whole thing. By the end of the week, it happened again. John was coming home from a late shift just after midnight. Coco started barking before he even pulled into the driveway. When he stepped out of the car, he spotted a cruiser idling across the street. Lights off, engine running, same car, same driver. He stared, the car didn't move. John turned slowly and walked to his door, locked it behind him, pulled the blinds. He didn't sleep well. The next morning, he filed a quiet incident report with the clinic's HR department. Nothing dramatic, just a record, in case things escalated. He didn't expect them to do much, but he wanted a paper trail. The system didn't believe stories, it believed signatures and timestamps. A week passed, then another. The officer started showing up outside the clinic every other morning, always in plainclothes, sometimes standing across the street, sometimes pretending to be on his phone, sometimes just sitting in his car, engine on, eyes straight ahead. Coworkers noticed. One of the receptionists asked if John had a stalker. Angie joked about someone having a crush. John just smiled it off. He didn't know how to explain the pressure in his chest every time he saw that car again. Didn't know how to say that it wasn't about flirtation, it was about being watched like a problem. One Friday, as he was walking into the clinic, the officer passed close by, too close, and in a low voice that barely carried, he said, "Don't think I don't know what you people do behind closed doors." John froze. He didn't respond, not this time. Instead, he turned on his heel, walked back to his car, and pulled out his phone. He started recording. From that day forward, every interaction, no matter how small, got logged. Every time the officer showed up, John filmed, quietly, calmly, just enough. He wasn't angry, not yet, but he was awake now. And something was coming. John didn't tell anyone about the first time the officer came into the clinic pretending to be a patient. At least not at first. It happened on a Tuesday. The waiting room was half full. Rain patted the windows in slow, lazy sheets. Everyone looked damp and tired, the kind of morning that made you want to stay in bed. John was halfway through checking in a man for a glucose screening when he saw him sitting in the back row, jacket zipped up, cap low over his forehead. No clipboard, no appointment. John didn't say anything. He just finished with the patient in front of him and ducked into the break room. He stood there for a moment, staring at the water cooler, thinking. Then he walked to the front desk and leaned down. "That man in the back," he said to the receptionist, "did he sign in?" She shook her head. "No, he just sat down, thought he was waiting for someone." John walked back out and stood near the exam rooms, watching. After a few minutes, the officer stood and wandered toward the vending machines, took his time, glanced down the hallway. His eyes caught John's. "You got coffee back there?" he asked casually. "This is a clinic," John said, "not a diner." The man smiled. "You always this jumpy." John didn't answer. The officer wandered back out the door just like that. No appointment, no reason to be there, just a presence, a shadow. Later that day, John filed another report. This one went beyond HR. He sent it to the clinic director and copied legal. Included the date, time, video footage from the hallway, and a screenshot from the front desk camera. Still no name, but the face was clear, too clear to keep brushing off. That night, he called his sister. "I think I'm being harassed," he said. There was a pause. "By who?" "Le cop." Silence on the line. "For being gay." "Feels like it." "You're documenting everything." "Yeah." "Good, keep going." That was her way, no dramatics, just quiet resolve. It helped, gave him permission to keep moving. The next escalation came the following weekend. John had taken Coco for a walk around the block. The air was crisp, early spring settling in. Kids rode scooters on the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, someone grilled something that smelled like sausage. It felt like a normal Saturday. Then, as they rounded the corner near the old laundromat, a cruiser rolled up and stopped beside him. The window came down. "Evening," the officer said. John didn't stop walking. The cruiser inched forward. "You ignoring me now?" John turned, slow and deliberate. "Am I being detained?" "No." "Then I'll keep walking." "You always this rude." John held up his phone. The screen was already recording. "You followed me to work, showed up at my clinic, sat outside my apartment. Do you want to explain why?" The officer leaned back in his seat. "I don't know what kind of fantasy you're building, but you might want to dial it back. I've got dates, times, video." "Sounds obsessive." John lowered the phone slightly. Is this how you spend city resources, harassing nurses? The officer didn't respond. John turned again and walked home. That night he sent everything to a civil rights attorney he found online. The form was simple: unlawful harassment by law enforcement, targeted due to sexual orientation. He attached the videos, his written logs, screenshots of the cruiser plates, and a summary of every encounter. He didn't know if it would go anywhere, but it felt like crossing a threshold. The next morning, a reply landed in his inbox. "Let's talk. You're not the first to report this, officer." John stared at the message for a long time. Later that week, he met the attorney, a white woman in her 50s named Joanna, at a small office on the east side. She didn't waste time. "I've had 3 other clients complain about him," she said. "One trans woman, 2 gay men, all with similar patterns." John sat still, and nothing's been done. "They settle quietly, or people drop it. Most don't want their names public." He nodded. "I'm not rich. I don't want to go to war with the city." "You won't have to," Joanna said. "Not alone." She pulled a folder from her bag. "These are copies of prior complaints, redacted, but they show a pattern, same tactics, same intimidation, always in uniform or close enough to pass." John flipped through the pages. Familiar words jumped out. Followed, watched, unprovoked, slurs, presence near residents. Joanna leaned forward. "The city won't act unless they have to, but if we file a formal complaint and tie it to a broader pattern, they'll be forced to respond, especially if media pressure builds." John exhaled. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you've got, and your commitment to stay visible. They'll try to discredit you." "I don't care," he said. "I'm not backing down." Joanna smiled. "Good, then we're in this." The formal complaint went in that week. It was clinical, precise. Every incident dated, matched with supporting material. John had built a wall of facts, not emotion, not assumption, just the truth, brick by brick. The city's internal affairs division acknowledged receipt, standard procedure. No apology, no timeline, no promises. But 2 days later, a local reporter called. "I got a tip," she said, "about a harassment case involving a city officer. Your name came up." John froze for a second, then said, "I'll talk on record, but only if we stick to facts." The article dropped the next Monday. Clean headline: a calm photo of John outside the clinic, no sensationalism, just a quiet truth. Local nurse alleges harassment by city officer, documents pattern of intimidation. The phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Patients called to offer support. A church group dropped off cookies and a thank you card at the clinic. Someone from the city's LGBTQ+ alliance sent flowers and a list of pro bono legal contacts. John kept going to work. Never changed his route, never spoke the officer's name aloud. But the cruiser stopped appearing after that article, like a shadow that couldn't stand the daylight. Then came the pushback. It started small. A patient file went missing at the clinic. Then a rumor floated around that John had forged his credentials, completely false. HR launched a routine audit of his paperwork. His landlord received an anonymous complaint about noise and unpermitted guests, all within 10 days of the article going live. He documented everything, sent it all to Joanna. "These are scare tactics," she said. "We're getting close." "Close to what?" he asked. "To proving it's systemic." John looked out the window at the quiet street below. "Good," he said, "because I want the whole system to feel this." The letter from Internal Affairs arrived folded in thirds and marked confidential. John read it 3 times before setting it down beside his mug. It was official now. The department had launched a formal investigation into Officer Wesley Dunn. They called it a routine review of conduct, but everyone involved knew what it really was: a response to pressure, a reaction to noise that had finally grown too loud to ignore. John didn't feel relief. Not yet. He knew how these things worked. Internal Affairs wasn't in the business of believing people like him. They were in the business of protecting the institution, keeping things quiet, controlled, minimized. Still, the process had started. That meant something. He met with Joanna again that week in her office, which always smelled faintly of strong coffee and aging file folders. She wore the same calm expression she always did, like she was 2 steps ahead of a conversation you hadn't started yet. "They're going to try to keep it internal," she said. "They'll drag their feet, poke holes in your documentation, make it seem like a personality clash instead of a pattern." "I've got video," John said. "They'll say it's inconclusive, that it doesn't show intent. You need more witnesses, records, everything." He nodded. "I've got coworkers who saw him in the lobby. I can ask." "Don't ask," Joanna said. "Let me. If you start collecting statements now, they'll say you're orchestrating something. It has to look clean." John sat back in the chair. "This is what it takes, huh?" "It always takes more when it's someone like you," she said, "but that's also why it matters." The next few weeks passed like walking on ice, each step forward met with a slow, creaking tension just beneath his feet. John kept working, kept arriving early, seeing patients, doing paperwork. The clinic staff didn't bring it up unless he did, though he noticed the way some of them looked at him now, like they weren't sure what they were allowed to say. Only Angie stayed exactly the same. One night after closing, she slid a folded sheet of paper into his locker. On it was a handwritten note. "I saw him outside 3 times, I'll say that. I'll say it to whoever needs to hear it." He texted her thank you. She replied with a thumbs up and a gif of a raccoon slapping a table. Not long after, Joanna brought in someone new, Trey, a white lawyer in his early 30s, clean-cut and careful with his words. He worked with a watchdog group that tracked civil rights abuses and helped build public cases against cities that covered for their officers. "We've seen this guy's name before," Trey said, flipping through his notes. "Not enough to get traction, but enough to recognize the shape of it. He goes after queer people, always just within the edge of plausible deniability." "Then why is he still working?" John asked. "Because no one wants to be the department that admits they promoted a problem. It makes them look liable. So they let him float, let him transfer stations. He's good at towing the line." John's jaw tightened. "He didn't tow it with me. That's why this might be different." They set up interviews with the other victims, quiet meetings in closed rooms. One of them, a trans woman named Tasha, sat across from John with her hands folded in her lap and told her story in a voice that barely broke above a whisper. She'd been pulled over twice in 1 month for unsafe driving, even though she hadn't gotten a single ticket in 5 years. She showed him the dashcam footage she'd saved, the way the officer leaned into her window, how his hand lingered on his belt the entire time. "It was Wesley, same eyes, same smirk. He told me he could take me in just for looking suspicious," she said. "I thought he meant for being trans. I didn't know it was bigger than that." John nodded. "It is." Word started spreading, quietly at first. A counselor from the city's LGBTQ+ resource center reached out, then someone from a local paper's investigative desk. Then a retired officer who'd worked a shift with Dunn years ago and left the force early because, in his words, "there was no stopping guys like him, and I wasn't about to play along." Joanna started building a portfolio of testimonies. Video clips, written statements, phone call logs, a timeline of complaints filed, closed, dismissed, over 24 items. None of it damning on its own, but together it told a story. A long, mean one. Meanwhile, John kept getting poked. A letter showed up in his mailbox claiming he owed back taxes. A city inspector randomly appeared to review a parking complaint about his car. His tires were slashed one morning outside the clinic. No witnesses, no cameras. John reported everything. He didn't retaliate, didn't shout online. He documented, archived, saved, but it was getting to him. The tension built up in his chest like coiled wire. He could feel it in the middle of his back whenever he sat still too long. Some nights he'd stand at the window and just stare at the sidewalk, waiting to see that cruiser again. It hadn't shown up since the article, but he never let himself relax. Then came the letter from the city attorney. They wanted a meeting, not in court, not in public, a quiet sit-down, to discuss concerns. Joanna read it 3 times and then called John. "They're scared," she said. "They want to contain this." "I'm not interested in silence money," he replied. "You might not get a better offer." "I don't want money," John said. "I want accountability." The meeting was held at a nondescript office building near City Hall. John wore a button-down, no tie, just clean and presentable. Joanna sat on one side of him, Trey on the other. Across the table were 2 city attorneys and a woman from HR who didn't say a word the entire time. They spoke in soft, passive voices. "Unfortunate misunderstandings. Unintended consequences. Valued community member." John listened, let them finish. Then he opened his folder. "This is everything," he said. Every time he showed up without cause, every comment, every action, cross-referenced with testimony from other victims. "You don't need to believe me, you just need to read what's in here." They took the folder, flipped through it like they were looking at old receipts. When they glanced back up, their expressions were tighter. "We'll follow up," one of them said. "You'll do more than that," Joanna replied, "or this doesn't stay in this room." John stood, he didn't shake their hands. Back at home, he sat on the couch beside Coco and watched the city through the window. It was raining again, not hard, just enough to make the streetlights shimmer. He'd opened the door now. There was no going back. And somewhere in that building across from City Hall, Officer Dunn was hearing the same thing for the first time. "You're not untouchable anymore." The press didn't get their hands on the story all at once. It came in pieces. A leak here, a whisper there. An unnamed source said the city had launched a formal review of Officer Wesley Dunn's conduct. A blog picked it up, then a freelance journalist posted a thread on social media pulling together known complaints. Someone unearthed court records from a minor case Dunn had worked years ago that had quietly settled after a use of force complaint. John didn't speak publicly again, not yet. Joanna told him to hold steady. Let the story breathe, she said. Let people start connecting the dots on their own. And they did, slowly but visibly. One morning, John walked into the clinic and found a box of donuts at the front desk with a note taped to the top. "We believe you," from the baristas across the street. Angie grinned when she saw his face. "I already claimed two," she said, biting into one. "Justice tastes like maple glaze." John laughed, but his smile faded before the end of the day. It started with a phone call, blocked number, calm voice. "You think this makes you a hero?" the caller asked. "All you're doing is causing problems." John hung up. The next day, someone spray-painted a slur on the sidewalk in front of his apartment building. It was cleaned up within hours, neighbors acted fast, but it still left a mark. Not on the pavement, on him. Joanna reported it to the police. No response. 3 days later, John's photo was posted on an anonymous local forum with the headline, "This man hates cops and lies to get attention." The post included out-of-context quotes from his first interview and claimed he'd doctored evidence to smear a decorated officer. John scrolled through the comments. He knew he shouldn't, but he did. Liar, attention seeker, probably made the whole thing up. A few were worse. He closed his laptop and sat very still for a long time. That night he met Joanna and Trey at the law office, the room quiet except for the humming of the building's heating system. Joanna didn't sugarcoat it. "This is how they work," she said. "They don't just defend the officer. They try to make you look unstable, dishonest, untrustworthy. They want to shift the conversation from his behavior to your credibility." John leaned forward, then we shift it back. Trey opened a new folder. Good timing. The city opened the formal misconduct hearing. Internal Affairs is taking statements. They're interviewing clinic staff and asking for a list of documented interactions. "Do they already know about the other victims?" John asked. "They know," Joanna said. "They're pretending they don't, but they know." The next morning, John got called into HR. "We've received a request for your full personnel file," the HR manager said, flipping through a set of printed pages. "It's part of the investigation. You're not in any trouble." But the tone in her voice said otherwise. She looked uncomfortable, like she was handling something radioactive. "They're going to dig into everything," she added. "Missed shifts, patient complaints, anything they can spin, just be prepared." John nodded. He walked out of the room and back to his locker. Everything he'd done, every extra hour, every weekend, every time he'd covered for a sick colleague, none of it would matter now. The system didn't care how well you did your job, it only cared whether it could silence you before your words reached too many ears. He sat on the bench and texted his sister. "They're coming after me now," she replied instantly. "Let them. You've got the truth. Keep standing." The next day he got a call from his old college friend Leo. They hadn't spoken in months, but Leo had seen the article, then the forum posts. "You okay?" he asked. "Define okay," John said. Leo hesitated. "I've seen this before with another friend when he spoke out about harassment in his department. They tried to destroy him. Just keep your head down, don't take the bait." "I'm not hiding. Just be safe." John thanked him and hung up. He stared out the window at the city below. From up here, everything looked clean. Straight roads, neat buildings, trimmed trees, but he knew better. The rot was just beneath the surface. The following week, the city held its first internal review hearing. John wasn't invited yet, but Angie was, so were two other clinic staff members. One of them, a part-time janitor named Marcus, called John afterward. "They asked weird questions," he said. "Like, did you ever raise your voice? Ever have problems with coworkers? Like they were looking for something dirty." "What did you say?" "I told them you were the only nurse who ever remembered my kid's name." John smiled, "Thanks." But that night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how easily they could twist a single mistake into a character flaw. How a tired word said at the wrong time or a misfiled chart could become a wedge used to dismantle everything he'd built. He started compiling his own records, not just the harassment, but every performance review, every patient compliment, every email from coworkers thanking him for staying late. It wasn't just about defending himself anymore. It was about proving that what he'd experienced couldn't be dismissed as a personal grudge or overreaction. Joanna sent him updates every few days. The city was stalling. The department hadn't put Dunn on leave yet, no official suspension, no statement, just quiet maneuvering like they were hoping the news cycle would forget. But then something broke the silence. A second article dropped, this one written by the investigative reporter John had spoken to weeks ago. It included snippets from testimonies by other victims, video stills, a summary of prior complaints that had gone unaddressed. It painted a clear picture. Officer Dunn wasn't just a bad apple. He was a symptom of something bigger, something the city had ignored. The article went viral, calls flooded into the mayor's office. The police chief held a press conference the next day, a polished speech, measured words. "We take all allegations seriously, we will review the facts thoroughly." But John noticed something. For the first time they used Dunn's name. That same evening, John's phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Ortiz?" a voice asked. "This is Detective Howard, Internal Affairs. We'd like to schedule your official statement." John stared at the wall for a second before responding. "Send me the date and time," he said. When he hung up, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. His muscles ached from tension. His eyes burned from staring at screens too long, but his mind was clear. They weren't brushing him off anymore. They were listening. Now came the part where everything he'd recorded, written, and survived would be laid bare. Now came the part where the system had to decide if it would protect one of its own again or finally do the right thing. The room was too cold. Cheap tile floors, plastic chairs, the buzz of a fluorescent light that hadn't been replaced in years. John sat with his hands in his lap, back straight, a printed folder resting on the table in front of him. Joanna sat to his right. Trey to his left. Across the table was Detective Howard, pen in hand, recorder on the table, expression unreadable. "This interview is being conducted at the request of Mr. John Ortiz regarding complaints filed against Officer Wesley Dunn," Howard said, voice calm and flat. "All participants present have agreed to be recorded." John nodded once. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say, not out loud but in his head over and over again. Every word had been sharpened in the silence of sleepless nights, every moment replayed, catalogued, and filed. He wasn't going to stumble now, he walked them through it calmly, clearly. The first time Dunn followed him from the gas station, the look in the cruiser, the silent waiting outside the clinic, the plainclothes visit inside the building, the low-voiced slurs. The vandalism, the phone calls, the false accusations online. He laid out his logs, dates, times, locations. He passed over screenshots, copies of the videos, affidavits from clinic staff who had seen Dunn lurking nearby. When he spoke, he didn't raise his voice, didn't editorialize. He let the facts sit in the air like slow-building heat. Howard didn't interrupt. He took notes, asked a few questions, mostly to clarify timeline. But there was something in his eyes, a shift from neutral to cautious interest, that told John the case was finally getting under their skin. After an hour, Howard ended the session and asked them to wait in the lobby while he printed the transcript. When he left the room, John leaned forward, his voice quiet. He looked shaken. "He knows Dunn been protected for too long," Joanna said. Trey nodded. "They all know." While they waited, John checked his phone. 3 missed calls from a number marked unknown. No voicemail, just silence. He didn't return the call. That afternoon, while walking Coco through the alley behind his building, he noticed something sticking out of his mailbox. A piece of paper folded once. No envelope. He opened it slowly. One sentence scrawled in shaky block letters. "We don't forget rats." He folded the note and put it in his pocket. No panic, just pressure. He was used to it now. He filed a police report, not expecting action, just continuing the trail of evidence. He forwarded a copy to Joanna and Trey. "They're trying to push you," Joanna said. "They already did," John replied, "and I didn't fall." The next morning, the first real break came. A former officer, someone who had worked directly with Dunn 2 years ago, agreed to speak with the investigators. He didn't go public, but the department leaked just enough to make sure it landed in the media. He expressed discomfort with Officer Dunn's language during traffic stops, one article said. Reported witnessing intimidation behavior, requested a transfer after complaints were dismissed. Suddenly, the story shifted. It wasn't just about John anymore, it was about the department. The next hearing was closed door, but rumors spread fast. Dunn had been placed on administrative leave, not fired, not suspended, but removed from active patrol. It was the first visible sign of consequence. And then Dunn struck back. A new article surfaced on a fringe media site quoting an anonymous source from inside the department. It accused John of falsifying his credentials. Claimed he'd forged his nursing license and was under investigation for patient misconduct. The article included a blurry photo of John at a Pride event from 2 years ago. He was smiling, wearing a pink "Health is for Everyone" t-shirt, standing next to a rainbow flag. The implication was clear. John was being painted as a liar, a fraud, someone with a political agenda. By the time Joanna called him, the article had been shared thousands of times across social platforms. "They're trying to poison the jury pool," she said. "This won't hold in court, but it doesn't need to. They just want the public to doubt you." John didn't respond. He was sitting at his kitchen table, the screen of his laptop glowing in the dark room. Coco rested at his feet. "I've never faked anything," he said quietly. "We know. And I'm not ashamed of that picture." "You shouldn't be." But it wasn't about shame. It was about control. Dunn wasn't trying to win, he was trying to drag John down with him. John closed the laptop. The next day, the clinic's director held a press conference, not because of pressure but because her staff demanded it. She stood behind the podium, surrounded by nurses, doctors, janitors, and volunteers. She wore a pin on her collar, small, silver, in the shape of a caduceus. "John Ortiz has served this community with integrity and compassion," she said. "We stand with him, we always have." The video of her speech went viral. The backlash against the smear campaign turned swift and loud. LGBTQ+ groups posted side-by-side comparisons, John's patient reviews versus the anonymous lies. Journalists began demanding an official audit of the police department's internal affairs process. A petition to remove Dunn from the force reached 50,000 signatures in a day, Trey called that night. "They overplayed their hand," he said. John allowed himself a smile. Then 2 days later, another call came, this time from the city itself. "We're offering a settlement," the voice said. "It includes a formal apology and a commitment to review departmental procedures. We'd like to avoid trial." Joanna read the draft. The apology was watered down. The reforms were vague, no mention of Dunn by name, no public accountability. "They're not offering justice," John said. "They're offering silence." "It's your call," Joanna said, "but I don't think you've come this far just to make it easier for them." He thought about that night in the parking lot, the way Dunn had looked at him. The way people had looked through him his whole life, quietly, cleanly, like he wasn't even there. He thought about Angie's note, about Tasha's trembling hands in that closed meeting room, about his sister texting him in the middle of the night just to say, "I'm proud of you." He looked Joanna in the eyes and said, "We go to court." The courthouse smelled like paper and polish and something sterile, like a place meant to look clean no matter how many lies passed through its walls. John stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, hands in his pockets, suit too stiff around his shoulders. Joanna stood beside him, arms folded, lips pressed tight. Trey paced. Reporters stood behind ropes 10 feet away, quiet now, though their cameras had already captured their share of stills for the headlines. John wasn't nervous. He thought he might be. But there was no room for nerves anymore, just readiness. Inside, the courtroom buzzed softly with low voices. The public gallery was full, people from the clinic, local activists, a few familiar faces from the neighborhood. Angie sat in the second row, a notebook in her lap even though she wasn't writing anything. Dunn sat at the defense table, flanked by his union lawyer and another suited man from the department's legal office. He looked smaller than John remembered, still trying to wear the same unreadable face, still carrying himself like someone who thought he had time to win. He didn't. The judge entered, they stood. Formalities passed like a wave, then the first witness was called. It was Marcus, the janitor from the clinic. He wore a clean button-up shirt and answered slowly, clearly. "Describe seeing Dunn near the clinic multiple times. Describe the officer entering without signing in. Describe John looking tense, looking over his shoulder even in the staff lounge." Next came Angie. She didn't flinch. She recounted how John told her about being followed. Described the look on his face after Dunn left that first day. She said, "You learn to recognize fear when you've worked in health care long enough. It shows up in the body before the voice ever admits it." Joanna introduced the video evidence next. Clips from John's phone, screen grabs from security footage, photos of the cruiser license plate, timestamps lined up with his written logs. When the footage of Dunn pulling into the clinic parking lot played, the room went still. When the footage of him walking in without a clipboard or appointment scrolled by on the screen, even the judge leaned forward. Dunn's lawyer tried to challenge the authenticity. Claimed the clips were out of context, that his client had professional reasons to monitor locations flagged for risk, but Joanna was ready. No incident reports were filed, no threats logged, no public safety alerts issued, she said. There was no police matter connected to the clinic. This wasn't policing, it was personal. Then John took the stand. He raised his right hand, took the oath, and sat down in the box like he'd rehearsed 100 times in his mind. The courtroom quieted, waiting. He told them everything. From the first tailing to the last threatening note, he told them about the feeling of being watched, the restraint it took not to shout back, the decision to document, not lash out, the careful collection of time, date, word, and action that built this case. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't let emotion take over. "This wasn't about one interaction," he said. "It was about being seen as a target, about being treated like my existence was a provocation. I followed every rule, I showed up to work, I stayed calm, and I was still harassed." He paused. That officer used his badge as a weapon, and the city handed it to him. The defense pushed back in cross-examination, tried to make him stumble. They brought up the online rumor about his credentials. Joanna objected. The judge sustained. They tried to paint him as an activist, as someone with an agenda. He nodded. "My agenda is safety," he said. For people like me, for the people I care for every day at the clinic, if that's a problem, then the problem isn't me. When he stepped down, he didn't look at Dunn. He didn't have to. Tasha was next. She told her story slowly, voice shaking but steady. The courtroom was silent as she described being pulled over twice in 1 month, the threat in Dunn's voice when he leaned through her window. I thought I was going to die, she said. I thought if I say the wrong thing, that's it, that's how it ends. When she stepped down, John reached out and held her hand for just a second. She squeezed his fingers hard. More testimonies followed, more stories, different voices, same pattern. Joanna closed the case with a quiet, firm summary. This was not a misunderstanding, she said. This was not miscommunication, this was a pattern, and the city allowed it to go unchecked until someone refused to be quiet. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. John sat in a waiting room with Joanna and Trey, eating pretzels without tasting them, staring at the wall as if he could will the outcome into existence. When the call came, they walked back into the courtroom together. The judge read the verdict slowly. Guilty of misconduct, guilty of targeted harassment, guilty of abuse of power. Dunn didn't move, just stared straight ahead, jaw locked. The city was ordered to pay damages, not just to John but to the other plaintiffs. A separate order mandated an independent review of the department's Internal Affairs Division. An oversight committee would be formed. Complaints would be reopened. Reform was coming, not as a suggestion, but as a court order. Outside, the press waited again. Cameras, flashbulbs, shouted questions. John stood at the top of the courthouse steps. Joanna gave a short statement, so did Trey, then they stepped aside. John cleared his throat. The microphones picked up every breath. I didn't come here to destroy someone, he said. I came here to protect people, people like me, people who keep their heads down because the system makes it dangerous to speak. He glanced out over the crowd. I wasn't brave every day, I was tired, I was scared, but I kept going and I had help. No one wins something like this alone. He paused. I don't feel victorious, I feel responsible. Because now other people know it can be done, and if it can be done once, it can be done again. He stepped down away from the microphones and walked into the crowd. People clapped, people hugged him. A woman cried into her sleeve. The wind was sharp, but John didn't shiver. Back at home, he sat on the couch with Coco curled beside him, the courthouse behind him, the cameras off. His phone buzzed nonstop, but he didn't look at it, not yet. For now, the quiet was enough. He had stood up, and the city had listened.